What's going on?
Uh, Trying to get back into the flow of things after being in LA for a week. Back in the home office, so
Yeah, how was LA?
it was good. Hot in the valley,
hmm
um, but man, there's some good eats. So much good food to explore. So
Now, did you drive it?
yeah, yeah. It was. I did halfway on the way there, but all the way on the way back, and it's just stupid. It's just brutal. Too
Mhm.
much.
How long of a drive?
Well, with stops, it was about 11 hours.
Okay.
So you can definitely do it much faster than that. But
hmm
I was, I had no time that I had to hit. So I tend to take it a bit more chill. So
Just a fun little road trip then.
yeah, yeah. But dude, I have to tell you, I didn't find, it was recommended near Cal State Northridge, this Vietnamese restaurant. It, one, two, maybe 10 tables
hmm
in this like tiny little strip mall. And I went at, I want to say a little after 10 at night, and it was packed. There were like two groups in
Really?
front. Um, but man, amazing. So owner operated place. And sit down. The owner comes up. Before I can even get it out, like what I want to order, he's like, "What do you like? What flavors do you like? How spicy do you like it? How hungry are you?" And I'm kind
hmm
of rattling off some answers. He's like, "All right, I'm gonna make you the best banh mi sandwich you've ever had." I'm like, "Okay." So it was just such a cool experience. And by the way, it's a vegan restaurant.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
so he made me a duck banh mi, and I don't know how it was incredible. It was delicious.
What
Um,
was the name of the restaurant?
I think it was called. Hold on, I have to look it up. It's in Reseda, and it is called something Loi Tai. Hold on, should have had it up. Let's see. Oh, I switched Instagram accounts. Got to go on my computer. See, we're new to try to manage the Instagram. It is called Vin Loi Tofu
Okay.
in Reseda. Um, I posted a picture on my Instagram of my sandwich. Here,
Yeah. What
Anyway,
was?
it was incredible, but it was just this like experience that the owner created. It was cool. It was
hmm
cool. So
Yeah. Um, there was a restaurant we went to when my brother-in-law, so my wife's brother and his family lived out there. We last visited them 5 years ago. I think we were out there and they took us to this vegan restaurant because they were in the LA area. Now, granted, there's tons of them there, but like I was curious to see if it was the same one because we went to this great vegan restaurant for breakfast, small
mm,
little place. And the tofu scramble I had for breakfast was just amazing.
it's we had this discussion. Did we have this discussion on the podcast a couple episodes back about scarcity and how it forces you to be deliberate and creative in the things that
Yes.
you create? That's the kind of the feeling I get. It's like when you have this limited set of ingredients that you can work with, it forces you to be incredibly deliberate and creative in what you are building. It reminds me of a place. So John took me to a place in LA called Cafe Gratitude, which
hmm
is a vegan restaurant, and I had enchiladas, which were and I guess the cheese is made out of cashew, or it was incredible. Again, I think just this sense that you have a scarcity. You don't have like a million items available to you. You have to really think about it, which could go
hmm
really well or really bad.
Yeah.
Like if you don't pull it off, it's just not going to be good. But if you're really good at what you do, man, you can create some amazing, amazing food with it. So anyway, it was a fun
Good stuff.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit. There used to be this sandwich shop here in Utah that I would frequent for many, many years. We've probably talked about it, where I'd go in and the owner would be like, "Oh, hey, Jason, you getting the?" And like he would have my order memorized. And he did that with like tons of people. and it was by far the best sandwich you could get in the area. But I think so many people went there just for the experience that the owner created. It's just,
Mhm.
it felt so cool to go in there, see this owner operator behind the counter, recognize you when you come in, remember the sandwich you normally get. Just feels good. Sadly, well, good for him. He retired and is enjoying his life now. I'm as an owner operator showing up at the restaurant every day except maybe Sunday. I'm sure gets draining after a while, and he ran it for a long time, so he's off enjoying retirement. But I sure do miss that place.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it was funny. Today is Wednesday, so
It is
Monday was Labor Day, and my wife and I were talking about how, with all the small little shops at the shore points we go to, um, like Labor Day, the crowd, and the crowds start to drop, towards the end of Labor Day because everyone's going home, everyone's got school and work the next day. So like that Tuesday and Wednesday following Labor Day, they close. They just straight up close. We're like,
Mm.
we're taking a couple days off. Now that the busy season's over, and because it was last year, we stayed down a couple days after Labor Day because we were in a position where we could. And that Tuesday we went out like, oh, let's go here and get some lunch. We love going to this place, but it's always crowded. So we go to there, they're closed. We decided to go to another
Hmm.
place, they're closed. Everybody was closed. Like, we're off. Figure it out on your own.
So you ended up at Pizza Hut?
No, I think we quick ran and got like something from like the grocery store and quick made it at home.
Got it.
Yeah.
I hear you. Yeah, we all need some downtime.
Yeah.
All need some downtime. Well, how was your long weekend?
It was nice. It was good. Lots of time spent swimming at the pool. Got together with the family at my brother's house. They had a pool put in over the winter.
Oh,
So a nice
nice.
big family pool party there. And like we got a membership to the local swim club this year. So that closed up on Monday. So we spent some time there Monday. Yeah, it was nice. It was a nice, relaxing weekend, to wrap up the summer. Now, granted, since our little one isn't, he doesn't go off to school for another year and a half. We're taking advantage of it. We've got some stuff planned in the next couple of weeks to take advantage of like the last little bits of summer in September with everybody back to school.
Nice.
Yeah, we had
Um,
3 weeks.
I'm,
We got a week coming up at the shore, which we're
ooh,
looking forward to. Like, I'm excited for it. A week at the shore, September.
yeah,
It's dead down there.
the
Like, I've already
best.
got things like planned out. Like, it's gonna be getting darker earlier, so it's not like we could stay out too late with him. Like, typically a vacation, you're up a little bit later. We'll go to bed earlier, but like we'll be up at the crack of dawn. Like, let's get up at the crack of dawn and walk the boardwalk when it's just the locals out at this point.
That's awesome. Yeah, enjoy it. And I can't help stop picturing your pool party as the pool party from Meet the Fockers.
I'm trying to remember. I haven't seen that movie in ages.
So
I'll
they're
have to look
they're
at the pictures.
they're they've got this like great spread of food out by the pool, and like they're having a fairly nice game of volleyball in the pool, and Fokker just gets up and nails that. Yeah, it got a little intense.
Yeah. Well, okay. So the food was away from the pool, but we had like my brother had a volleyball, but then they also have like the pool basketball hoop.
Oh
So it
yeah.
turned into like a 3-on-3 with like me, my brother, my uncle, my brother-in-law, my nephew, and it got a little intense.
Those games tend to trend that way, as long as no one got injured.
Nah, no one got injured.
Nice.
No one got injured.
Unlike the Turkey Bowl when
There were a couple times with the family turkey bowl where I pulled a hamstring.
right, every year it's like, yeah, nah, we're still 20, we can do this. Yeah.
All right. So I'm struggling for a segue into our topic. So I'm just going to jump into it because that's, we can give bits for forever about like the fun stuff we want to do, but like, let's talk a bit about analytics. So I want to continue something we talked about a couple weeks ago. We were talking on a particular episode, and you brought up about the people who um who work within analytics. So your analysts, your data scientists, and what they think about with their job day to day.
Mm.
And really, part of this is part of this conversation is going to be around taking risk, because we were talking about, where we started to talk about, and we kind of stopped because we're like, oh, this is good, a good topic on its own. We were talking about how implementation and constantly sending reports are low risk. Um, this is the volume that we saw. This is the activity that we saw. We deployed these new dimensions. All of that. It's low risk. It shows action
Mm-hmm.
that's going on. It's the minute you start making recommendations based on data, like you cross this line, and that's this line that people tend to stop at. Um, so why is there this risk with stepping over that line, from moving from reporting into insights, making recommendations and saying, not only did we see this with the data, we believe the data is telling us X, or that we should do Y.
Yeah, and I think there's several reasons why this is happening, but the fundamental step over that line is, if I'm sending out a report, if I'm enabling you to look at a dashboard, it's, hey, I like, this is just the data. I'm just giving it to you. I'm just helping you consume it. I'm not making any real claims. And there's this fuzzy area that lots of organizations and agencies use, called adding commentary, which is basically just pointing out the obvious, right? So you have a report. I'm going to send Jim a report. It's automated. It shows up in your inbox every Friday. The next step that kind of gets into this fuzzy area is, I'm going to add commentary. So before I send it out, I'm say, oh, by the way, Jim, you might want to take a look at the sales figure because it was up this week compared to last week. So again, I'm not really putting myself out there. I'm just kind of observing what's already there, right? Yeah, I can see that the number went from 10 to 20 this week. So it's up. Yeah. It's in that step over the line in which you kind of put yourself out there, in that you're saying, okay, not only am I going to provide the data, I'm going to make some conclusions, provide some insights, maybe even give some recommendations based on what we're seeing in the data. One, I think that puts a lot of people in the digital analytics space in a place of unease, because I think it's putting yourself out there. We tend to be a bit more introverted, kind of put me in the basement and work on stuff, but I don't necessarily want to sit at the boardroom table and talk about the results. So there's that unease of just kind of being out there. But I think the bigger component of it is that, um, and rather than blaming the business, rather than blaming stakeholders for pushing back and being tough, which they should do, and which I was never trained to do when I first worked client side. I remember, I probably shared this story before. I remember one of the first times that I presented to our executive team, I nearly left the meeting in tears. Like, they beat me up. I felt like they were asking all these hard questions, but they were doing what they should have been doing, right? They wanted to understand the data, and I needed to come prepared to defend the position, defend the data, and I wasn't. I didn't. I had no idea that that was part of my job, and I think, especially in the digital analytics space, more than the broader analytics space, business analytics space in general, we don't really talk about this topic, and we don't really train our analysts how to handle these situations. So we say, hey, here's how to collect data, here's how to run some calculations, but we don't really tell them, well, here's how to think about it in a business context, here's how you might want to think about presenting to a team of stakeholders, here's what you need to be prepared for. So often they get in those situations, and their first experience in their mind is a highly negative experience, because they feel like, they're basically getting kicked in the face, saying, well, wait a minute, how did you calculate this, or what do you mean by that? And I think our initial reaction, at least mine was to become defensive and take it personally, rather than say, oh, that's a good question. Of course they would want to know how I calculated that number. If they didn't, I should be suspicious of why they're just taking me at face value. So I think a lot of that is, again, just putting yourself out there. One, we lack training on how to properly present to a team of stakeholders and executives. And two, I just think in general, our personality is a bit more wanting to be behind the scenes and putting yourself out there, whether it's live in a meeting or via email. You're putting yourself out there and opening yourself up to tough questions, maybe people questioning why, who's Jason to give us input on how to run our business, and that can be scary. And I think that for that reason, so many in the digital space kind of walk that line, are okay providing a little bit of commentary. But if I'm going to take a big step over that line and say, and here's what the data means, and here's what our recommendations are, that's scary to a lot of people. And I think we need to do a better job mentoring and training our analysts on how to handle that situation. Because if we can't do that, we're really holding ourselves back from creating the value that I know we're capable of creating.
Yeah, and you got into where my next question is like what you see is missing. Why is that the case? Like why do analysts feel timid, especially if they have the data to back them up?
Sorry, say that again. I was sidetracked.
No, I was just, continuing. I was just saying like that you actually started to get into my next question with what do you think is missing with analysts being so timid, especially if they have the data to back up the perspective that they're bringing.
Yeah.
And I asked that question more or less to continue the conversation. I mean, I know the answer too. I've been in those kinds of meetings too, where you have an executive who has their opinion and will be very, very blunt with
Mm-hmm.
defending it, even if there is data to provide another perspective on it. So I've been in similar meetings to you where someone presents something, or even I've provided like a perspective on how something should be done, and someone gets up there and just starts browbeating people, and you're like, okay, I'll go back to my desk.
Well, so part of that is obviously lots of top level executives are extreme A type personalities. So, that's just going to come with the territory. But I also think as analysts, if you're timid, you come across like you don't have a lot of confidence in what you're doing, it's like blood in the water.
Yeah.
So you're taking a probably already very strong type A personality and you're showing weakness, they are going to pounce on that.
They smell that. The
Oh
minute
yeah,
they feel like you feel the slightest bit unsure, they are going to jump on that.
man. And in full transparency, I've felt that way through most of my career, even into the first few years at 33 Sticks. And I can remember vividly the day where that changed. I was on site with a client. We were in a conference room full of big windows. The CMO was there. I think the VP of sales was there. Um, one of the senior developers was there. And we were all kind of talking about data and talking about how we're making use of data to inform the product roadmap. And I don't remember the exact conversation, but I remember sitting there and all of a sudden, like a bolt of lightning, I'm like, I am, when it comes to analytics, the smartest person in this room. Not to be conceited or cocky or arrogant, but it was just this sense of, wait a minute, I belong here. And that took several years into 33 Sticks, if you can believe that, to like get to that level of confidence of, I know what the hell I'm doing and I belong at this table. And I think it's really important that again, I want to be careful to be clear that I'm not saying that we need to be, you know, type A personalities, super strong. We don't need to be jerks. We don't need to be cocky and conceited. But, if we've been doing this for 15 years and we've put in the work, man, who else deserves to be at that table? And so I think it's such a big thing that creates this snowball effect where we show up, we come very well prepared to present our data and our insights, but we do so from a place where we're lacking confidence. We're in a room of people that we're scared or intimidated by their titles. We start questioning ourselves like, I don't think I deserve to be in this room. And even though we have all the experience, we have put in the work to provide a very meaningful presentation of our insights, it comes across again as very meek and timid, and people pounce on that and they smell it and they sense it, and it devalues what we're delivering. And if nothing else, like, we've put in the work, let's make sure that the way we present it doesn't take away from the value that we're creating. Because not only does it hurt us in that meeting, it hurts us in how we're positioned. And then we kind of slink back to our office and we say, you know what, I'll stick to sending out reports. And then it just snowballs.
Well, it feels like in this particular space, there are a lot of folks that suffer from imposter syndrome.
A lot. A lot. And do you think that is because of the space we're in and the environment that we're in, or do you think that the role that we fit naturally attracts people that may be more predestined, exposed? What's the right word? More in a space where they would suffer from that than maybe other jobs.
It was funny as you were talking, and I thought of that, like, wow, there is imposter syndrome, and it just seems like, you talk to folks in the space, you follow a lot of these people on social media, that they talk openly about the imposter syndrome they feel. And to answer your question, I kind of feel that it is the type of people it attracts.
Yeah.
It's it's definitely, yeah, I want to say it attracts those people that are maybe normally what's the word we're both trying to find, like the people that would fall into that kind of mindset,
Yeah.
that I have, I have what I need to prove a point, but maybe I don't. And maybe it's the curious nature of the space, because you and I've talked many times about what we think will make people succeed. Like, what are some of the characteristics? And curiosity
Yes.
is top of that list. So could that curiosity be a double-edged sword, where
Mm.
you the curiosity makes you successful in that, you're constantly looking to learn more, but at the same time, that curiosity, that knowing that there's always something else to learn or something else to seek out, makes you doubt what you've found so far.
So you're saying there's no doubt that we overanalyze everything to maybe our
Yes.
detriment. Yeah,
Potentially, yes.
yeah. I mean, I can see that, and again, unfortunately, it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy of us not having a seat at the table. We've often talked about digital analytics sitting at the kids table at the holiday party, at the little card table tacked onto the end of the fancy formal dining table. We're not there with the adults, and I think part of it is a self-fulfilling prophecy where when we do get the opportunity to show up, we don't show up with confidence, and then they say, well, this is why they're sitting at the kids table, we can't have them showing up at the adult table, and acting childish. And so, not to say it's not difficult, because yes, and myself included, so many of us overanalyze things about ourselves, and often come to very negative conclusions that, again, we don't deserve to be there, I'm not qualified. Like, I can't tell you how many times early in my career I'm like, how did I graduate from college? Like, I must have fooled someone, and someone is going to eventually figure it out that I was a fraud and like call me on it, and everything's going to fall apart. We just think that way, but I think it's important to address. And this is a really important episode, because while we can talk about the tangible pieces and the logistics of why we kind of get stuck in this reporting, dashboarding frame of mind, really, I think the more valuable, important conversation is the fact that we do have some very known things, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's lack of training and mentoring on how to present to executives, how to defend your ideas, how to properly prepare and come to discuss how the data was collected, how it was processed, how it was calculated. We don't really have a lot of those conversations. We're really, really good at talking about how to collect data, how to make sure we have everything tuned up to do personalization correctly. We're talking about how to make sure we're not getting in trouble with GDPR and compliance issues. We're really good about talking about data visualization techniques, but not a lot of people in our space are talking about, well, how do we overcome imposter syndrome? How do we overcome this feeling that we don't belong at the table? How do we properly prepare to present to executives? We don't have those conversations. And those are very, very meaningful conversations, I believe, for getting us out of the basement, for getting us away from the kids' table to where we can sit with the adults, we can be in the boardroom, and we can be peers because we absolutely deserve to be there. We have the ability to be there, we have the intelligence to be there. But I think it's up to us and no one else to address some of those key issues that we're not really talking about in our industry that I think can go an incredibly far way to getting us a seat at the table. And that's not to say that the fundamentals aren't important. That, sure, we need to talk about proper data collection. Sure, we need to talk about the best way to visualize data. But if we haven't addressed those issues about our lack of confidence and ability to be at the table, as we started out this conversation for, we can have all the data. We can have the ability to defend it and have a very informed conversation with stakeholders. But if we're not right mentally to have that, we're going to come across as weak. People are going to sense it, they're going to pounce on it, and they're going to push us into the corner.
So how do we address those? How do we help someone who's maybe suffering from imposter syndrome? How do we build confidence as an industry that can provide recommendations with anybody else at the seat of that table with the organization? Finance, operations, marketing. You think of all of those other areas of a business that are sitting at that table. How can we build confidence to push back when we have the data?
So number one, I think what we're doing, like, we just need to be vulnerable enough to talk about it. We need to be able to say, this is a challenge. This is something that's hard for me. If we can't admit it, if we can't openly talk about it, we're probably never going to solve it. So I think that's a good first step. And the fact that, at least on social media, we're seeing more and more people being comfortable talking about, what they struggle with in their day to day, and, confidence and imposter syndrome. It's great. It's great that we're getting that out there so we can address it. From there, I think there are a few things that need to happen as analytics organizations. We need to think about, how are we going to make our people better and smarter. It's really, I don't want to say it's easy. It's easier to focus on the hard skills. I'm going to send you to training to learn how to implement X. I'm going to send you to training to learn how to build dashboards in Y. That's easier than taking a step back and saying, okay, how can I understand mentally and cognitively how my team works? And how can I give them the support and training to make them into stronger people on the soft side? We don't do it very well. And then as an industry as a whole, I think we need to prioritize that in the things that we value from a content perspective, from a who we get to speak at conferences, because again, it's easier to focus on the hard skills. Come to my session to learn how to implement X in GA4. That's going to draw a lot of asses to the seats, and maybe a very important session, but not at the cost of not having a session of, how can you invest in training your team to build confidence? How can you invest in training your team to learn how to speak the language of business? What things can you do? How can you provide mentoring to your top analysts so that they can sit down and have an incredibly meaningful shoulder to shoulder conversation with the CMO of your organization? Those topics need to be just as, if not more important than the hard skills. And it just feels like they're not right now.
Yeah. And you bring up a good one right there. A great example of how to speak the language of business. You, we've talked about this. This is another thing we've talked about ad nauseum. How many organizations, both together 33 sticks, and then earlier in our careers where working with folks on the technical side, they would not put a developer in front of any kind of like senior director or above.
Yeah, and
Like
it's
a lot.
unfortunate a lot, and it's unfortunate because these people have tremendous value to add and can help educate. But
But they get way
um,
too weedsy.
it's yeah, the communication is not at the right alignment. I shared the story of the first time I brought one of our data scientists to an executive readout when I was client side,
Yeah, and
right?
it did not
Like
go well.
it went horribly. In fact, the CEO pulled me aside and said, "Never bring them again. You can take their inputs, you can take their insights, and then translate it into a more meaningful conversation for us." So, it's not dumbing it down. It's translating it to a level of business, so that we're all on the same. Just think about it as trying to sit down and have a meaningful conversation in two completely different languages where you each may understand a few words in the other language. It's going to be incredibly difficult. So we need to standardize on some kind of language that we're talking about, and there is a very specific language when it comes to business. And um I think a big part of it is lack of training and mentoring. I also think a big part of it is ego, right? In from the more technical side, in that I'm not going to change the way. Like if they don't understand it, that's on them that they're not smart enough to understand. I'm like, wrong approach.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and then I've been in similar situations where a developer comes in and takes a conversation completely sideways. You're getting and this is not a knock on the developer at all, but it's the working with them on that kind of skill where you have an executive on board with something and then they go into the details which are not necessary for this particular conversation. This particular executive doesn't care.
Yeah,
They want you, and the reason why they don't care is they're looking at you as you figure these out. Why are you bringing them to me? If you're bringing them to me, that means there's a concern, and I need to stop this right now. That's the way I've learned to interpret that. If you're bringing certain details to an executive, they're going to say, "This means it's something I should be concerned of. I don't know what it is, so I'm just going to say no."
right. Yeah, and more empathetic I could not be. I mean, I spent the first 6 years of my professional career as a software engineer, and I think the first few years I had that attitude of, look, if you don't understand what I'm speaking, that's on you, man. Like you got to get with it and get smarter about this tech stuff. Um, but it was only me that I was hurting, right?
Mhm.
I was the one that couldn't communicate. I was the one that my career was probably being stunted or held back. And again, this shouldn't be an ego thing. This shouldn't be I have to dumb it down for an audience. That's not it at all. It's simply knowing your audience and preparing and presenting in the language that your audience understands and speaks. It is critically important. And again, I'll go back to, we tend to focus so much on the hard skills of what we do, which are very important. But if we don't also focus on the soft skills, all that work in, building our statistical models and creating this really fancy data visualization are lost because we simply are unable to communicate how it works, the value of it to an audience that's not their day to day. And they don't want it to be their day to day. That's why they hired you. But you need to figure out, how do I make this meaningful to my audience? And if you can't do that, then you will ultimately end up as Milton, right? Like keep moving your desk until you're down in the basement with a can of cockroach spray. Unfortunately, like that's the path that many of us in the digital analytics space are headed towards. If we're unable to recognize the importance of the soft skills of what we do and make some fundamental changes to improve that side of what we do. And I don't care if you're an implementer or an architect or an analyst or an optimization strategist, this holds true for all of you, that it is a critical piece to being a linchpin, to steal a word from Seth Godin, within the business. Like if you want to truly be a linchpin within your organization, all the statistical knowledge in the world isn't going to get you there. You have to figure out how to add the soft skills to be part of the boardroom, to have those conversations, not as a lesser, but as an equal to.
Mhm. Yeah, really, really good stuff. And yeah, like again, I got to start to wrap things up. The genesis of this was talking about like the difference of reporting versus insights, and that's where we're like, when it comes to insights, there's this line that people get very, very scared to cross, and when they're thinking of their day to day, it's like sometimes I just need to be as low risk as possible,
Yeah.
and it's and it's yeah, it's not to be unempathetic of that fear. We've all been that as part of our career, but like there's there needs to be a desire to want to take that risk. And again, like it's easy to say when my job's not on the line, but it's finding a way that to mitigate the risk. There's always going to be
Yeah.
risk. It's mitigating the risk in making those recommendations.
That's right. And something specific about this is that, again, we see it as risky to stick our neck out there and make some conclusions of the data or provide some recommendations. But in fact, it may be even more risky not to do that. Um, and I know, we have some listeners that like our sports analogies and some that don't. But in athletics, um, there's this concept that the athletes that are trying really hard not to get hurt because they're trying to reduce risk end up getting hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you can't, and a lot of it, and that's why sports psychologists, especially athletes coming back from injury, one of the biggest things they're overcoming is not physical therapy, it's mental therapy, because the bone is healed, the ligament is healed, but they have this mental barrier of they don't want to get hurt again. So they go out so cautious that they end up getting hurt again. Like they literally have to let that go so they can not get hurt. And I think the same thing applies here. We think it's risky to go beyond reporting, to go to insights, but I would argue it's actually riskier to not go there
Yeah.
because we think we're being safe, but actually we're making ourselves more of a target because we're providing less value.
Yeah. And you're going to make me give another Ted Lasso reference. So season 2 was all about mental health in sports. Like that was one of the major themes of the season. Anxiety. So the season starts out with um, the end of the previous season. Well, actually, I'm not going to spoil it, but they kick off the season. They're in mid season, and one of the top players is making a penalty kick, has a penalty kick to win the game. And as he's kicking the ball, he's like, again, one of their top players, as he's kicking the ball, the mascot, which is a greyhound, gets loose and is chasing this bird, which is flying right by the net. The dog jumps up, ball hits the dog, kills the dog. There's
Oh.
no spoilers here. It's the first episode of the season. So of course, like it sends him into a tailspin. And at that point, like he can't make a kick to save his life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all mental. So they
Yeah.
bring in a sports psychologist, which then it's not a spoiler, it's the plot device that sets up the entire season. But anyway, you made me think of that. But then the other thing I thought of, again, another sports reference here, in the NFL, like there's this the defensive formation called the prevent defense.
Mm-hmm.
And the joke is the prevent defense does everything but prevent you from, the prevent defense prevents you from winning,
Yeah.
because it's kind of like a formation they'll go into when they're trying to keep the score where it's at, hold the other team off. But because at that point you step back and are trying to prevent any kind of major play, the other team can start to eat up yardage. And the reason why they're able to start making those gains is because you've stopped attacking.
Yeah. When you play not to lose, you often lose, and
Yes.
and that's the case here. When you play not to get exposed, not to have the light shown on you, you often lose. And I hate to keep bringing this up, but the fact that these teams were the very first teams of layoffs at the start of the pandemic tell you all you need to know. If we were providing immense value, if we were seen as linchpins in the organizations, maybe we don't survive the layoffs, but I guarantee you it's not round one.
Yeah, very true. So to wrap things up, I'm going to ask one final question. Thinking about everything we just discussed, what does all of this mean in the context of sustainable analytics?
Well, it means that we need to be providing something valuable. And I think that really is at the core of a lot of these discussions. From a sustainability standpoint, if we're creating value, that in itself is going to drive sustainability. If it's something that is meaningful and creating value, that's going to create not only a desire, but it's going to create an emphasis. It's going to create the resources necessary to sustain your analytics practice, because it is creating value. Think about anything that you own personally. If it's not creating value, how motivated are you to sustain it, to maintain it? Probably not very. But if you have something that you cherish as an incredibly valuable to you, it's going to create this mindset of, I need to make sure that I maintain this. I want this to sustain for years in the future. So I do that with my cookware, right? Like, I have some cookware that is incredibly valuable to me. I don't have to create a model for how to sustain that cookware. I have a mental desire to. And so every time I cook, I go through, it's okay, I need to, clean my cast iron. I need to reseason it. I go through this process, like, and I almost find joy in the sustainability of it, as much as, if not more than, actually using it. And so if we're actually using the data, if we're actually getting real meaning and value out of it, it is going to be that spark, that fire, that's going to drive us to create some sustainable practices around it, because we don't want to lose it, because it is so valuable. If it's just, take it or leave it, we can rebuild it somewhere else, it's going to be really difficult to think in terms of sustainability, because it doesn't matter. Just throw it away. It's kind of like a cheap thing that we got from the dollar store. Just go buy another one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's that, which is the one side, but I think the other side of it too is again where we started this conversation, was the idea of like the generation of constantly just generating reports, the constant motion and implementation. If you're not, if you're just focusing on that, you're creating volume, and
Mm-hmm.
and at that point, if there is something of value, it's hard to find,
Mm-hmm.
or you just create this mess that you can't find any kind of value in.
Great call out. So if we emphasize that as our measure of success, then it's not a stretch to get to a point where every Friday I'm sending out an email to the entire team with the spreadsheet with 8,000 rows, and I'm calling it my dashboard.
Yes.
Right? Like,
Yes.
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Cool. Well, this was good. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I didn't expect to kind of go down that path, but as you kind of started talking about it, to me, it just kind of clicked that,
Yeah.
we get so hung up on the hard skills of our job, but it's the soft skills that have gone untalked about, which are, I think, really holding us back from getting to that place where we can create a sustainable practice that's creating the value, again, that I know we're capable of creating.
Hmm.
So it's up to
And
us to fix it.
I think it's something too. I know you mention it often. I think we should continue to repeat it. Is at the start of the pandemic, the analytics, the digital marketing teams were the first to be let go,
That's right.
because what they were seen as teams that were additional, they were extra, some value. Like they were not seen as critical to the organization.
That's right. We need to be
So
critical, because we are.
yeah. So cool. We will go ahead and wrap up there, and we will talk to everyone later.
See you.
See ya.